Hello everyone, and welcome to the first video on GCSE OCR Economics. Today, we're going to cover the actual process of the exam and how to answer the different types of questions. OCR Economics has two papers, one for microeconomics and one for macro. Each paper is structured the exact same, with being 90 minutes long. Each paper will have 21 mark multiple choice questions at the very start. It will then have 6 6-markers and 12 2-markers. The timings. In my opinion, you should attempt the multiple choice questions as quickly as possible. Take 10 minutes, and if you're not finished, move on and come back to them at the end. The multiple choice questions should be where you maximize your mark. You should be aiming for at least 17 out of 20. The analyze questions are a bit easier than the evaluate questions, and you should only take 6 to 7 minutes on them. If it's a diagram question, maybe even less. Evaluate questions often require a lot of writing, and should be able to be done in 10 to 12 minutes. The 2-markers, some that are calculations can be done in less than 30 seconds, but some that require definition and explanation can take up to 2 minutes. Remember, this test can be extremely time pressuring if you spend too long on even one section. If you are taking too long on a single question, skip it and come back to it at the end. So, how do you actually do the 6-markers? The 6-markers is where the grades change. If you manage to do well in all of them, you can get those graded to 9s. But the people who often struggle end up getting lower grades. How to do analyze questions. Analyze without a diagram. You start with a definition. You then do a chain of reasoning and then another chain of reasoning. These should be 2 paragraphs. The definition should be a key point in the question. For example, if the question is analyze the effect of a movement on the supply curve, you can either define supply or price equilibrium, depending on the context of the question. The chain of reasoning should be well developed and explained. You do not want to move from the beginning point straight to the end, but structurally explain how a process led to it. If a question asks you to analyze with a diagram, you still want to start with a definition, and then you need a fully labeled diagram. Then, in 2 or 3 sentences, describe the diagram and the movements or shifts that occurred, depending on the question. Then, you only need 1 chain of reasoning. Now, this is a bit confusing, but some questions that don't require a diagram are often much easier to do with a diagram. If you don't draw the diagram, you will still get credited based on the mark scheme, and you only need to do 1 extra chain of reasoning. Now, evaluate questions require much more writing than analyze and can be a bit more tricky. So, you want to start with a point and then evaluate it. Then another separate point and then evaluate that point. The evaluation should not be a separate point. It should be a counter or reason why the point 1 cannot work. At the end, you need a judgment. You cannot get above 4 marks without a judgment. It should be structured somewhat like, overall I think that something, depending on the question, because, and you give a separate point to the first 2 points, and then you give a very small evaluation saying, but this depends on. For example, if the question was, evaluate the importance of specialization to firms, you can say, overall I think specialization is important because it increases productivity, but this depends on, and you can come up with an evaluation. These questions can often be tricky, and the exam can be extremely time pressuring, but if you practice properly and give yourself enough time to do the 6-markers, you can get extremely well. I would recommend looking at the exam specification, because it has nearly every 6-marker you can be tested on. Additionally, before the exam in the upcoming weeks, I'd recommend going through all the multiple choices. For example, for paper 1, there's about 6 practice papers you can do. Take your time and do each multiple choice, and time yourself. You should be aiming for sub 10 minutes. Thank you for listening to Academic Scope, and I hope you come back for the next video where we start talking about the actual content in OCR Economics.